right. Well, this evening, my guest is Christine Stewart, who had a near-death experience in 1967, thereabouts, where she got hit by a car. Christine, welcome to the channel. It's so nice to have you. Why don't you tell us what happened?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Mhm.
I was just a kid coming home from school, messing around. I think you call it the sidewalk, we call it the pavement.
Mm.
And we have a curb on that pavement. And there was a whole bunch of us, and we were just goofing around, really, And I stepped off of the pavement, literally into the path of an oncoming car, and it hit me. And that's how the whole adventure started. It was just a pure accident. That poor man, this child just comes from nowhere. And I really felt sorry for him because it was 1967. There wasn't a lot of cars, and I just happened to walk in front of his. And that's how it started.
Accidents happen.
Yeah.
So you had obviously experienced something out of body, and you had some sort of spiritual experience attached to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thrown across the road. And as I was thrown, the trajectory took me across the road, and I literally landed on my head. And as I landed, there was no pain. I have to emphasize that there was no pain. There was this huge crack. I heard this crack. It was like really dry wood. And then I saw a flash, and I was out of my body. It was just like that.
Wow.
And traveling at enormous speed upwards.
Okay.
And that was how I came out of my body. Yeah.
And what did you see as you were traveling visually?
Initially, the ground going away underneath me. But then it was like people talk about going down a tunnel. I wonder whether that's actually the rushing, the speed. It feels like you're traveling through something, but it was just rushing and being lifted. And then there was a moment where I realized that I was in what we would call space.
Mm-hmm.
It was a darkened sky, there were stars around. And I had a moment, a millisecond of apprehension because I couldn't feel anything beneath my feet. And at that point, I then felt something, and I was stood on very solid ground somewhere. And I was in this place of space. And around me was the most beautiful vibration of love. It was just pure love. So that's how I got to where I was going, or where I was being taken.
Right. At the time, you were quite young, right? Were you 10, 11 years old at the time?
11 years old, yes.
Wow. So you hadn't experienced much yet.
Oh, absolutely nothing at all. Nothing like this for sure. 11-year-old child. But there was no fear, as I say. That was what I find interesting all these years later, that the only apprehension was that I couldn't feel any ground underneath my feet. And at the moment of feeling that apprehension, it's like somebody had placed it underneath there. And I was absolutely fine with that then. But that was a tiny bit of apprehension. I was in this beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I just knew that my body was elsewhere and I was somewhere else, and I was existing. I could hear very well. All my senses seemed to be heightened. I was aware of a lot of people around, but I couldn't see them. I could hear voices, and they had some concern, in the sense of you would be concerned for somebody, are they all right? And it was just this beautiful, overwhelming, pulsating vibration of it's love. It's just pure love. And I wanted to be there. There was no questioning. It was just a nice place to be.
Yeah. When you say that you heard voices and, was this earthly voices or voices on your path on this journey that you were on?
If I'm honest, I couldn't have told you at the time, but on reflection, it was the people that were there. There were souls there. I didn't see them like I can see you now. I was just aware of being surrounded by a lot of people, if that makes sense. There's a lot that I can't clarify, say that was, no, this was people that were around me, loving me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very strange.
Strange, but it sounds beautiful.
It was very beautiful.
And then what happened after that?
Well, as I was there, I became aware of one individual who was a lady,
Mm-hmm.
very, very beautiful lady. And she stood in front of what appeared to be what I would call here a large, tall hedge.
Okay.
It was some sort of foliage. And it was like she was stood in front of that. And in this hedge, there were flowers, the most beautiful flowers. They had massive heads on them. But I remember thinking, I don't know what those colours are. There are no colours like that I've seen in the physical world. They were so beautiful and they shimmered and they vibrated. They made a sound. And that drew my attention. But the whole focus really was on this thing with her. And I remember looking at her and thinking how very beautiful this creature, this lady was. And people have asked me since and said, oh, was it a religious? No, it was a beautiful lady and she shimmered. And this is quite hard to say. She was made from light.
Mm-hmm.
She shimmered light and it was a golden hue. And it was almost like it came out of everything. And it was love. It was, I keep saying this word, it was love.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and I at her. And I have to tell you, I'm very happy to be there. But she spoke to me, but not like I'm speaking to you with words. She made me understand that I really shouldn't be there and that I needed to go return. This was not my place. And I remember sort of like in my childlike way thinking, well, I'd like to stay here very much, please. And there was no revelation. There was no like, you must go back because you have work to do. I've heard of that happening. I just understood that for now, I couldn't be there, but I would at some point return later. The other thing that I do remember was that I kind of recognized this place. I recognized her, but nothing that I could say, more than that. And it was at the point where I understood that I needed not to be there or couldn't stay there, that I found myself back on the pavement and I had a huge pain in my head. And I remember some kid going, "Is she dead, mister?" And I was being lifted into the ambulance and taken to the hospital. So it was a matter of minutes, but it was so profound that it has carried me. I'm now 65 and it has carried me through my life. It was so very, very beautiful because that love, there are no words. That love, that total acceptance of us, there was compassion, there was truth, there was just beautiful love. And it's not just for me, it's for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Wonderful. Did you at any point, realize that you were dead, or maybe wondered if you had died? Maybe after
Oh,
the kid said, "Is she dead?"
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was only years later I kind of thought about it because, um, no, no, I didn't think I was dead because I was more alive than what I was when I was in the body. And this is what when I said about that, you have this, it's almost like hyper hearing. If you get a crowd of people around you and they're all talking, you can't discern what they're saying. It's all like, blah, 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 blah. But I could clearly hear each person, and it wasn't confusing. It's like when I looked around, I could see things so clearly. So I didn't think that I was ever dead. No, it was like being, yeah, hyper reality. And the colors were more vibrant, the senses, all of that kind of stuff that you don't get here, I guess. Yeah, so no, I never ever thought I was dead. No.
And you mentioned looking around. So what exactly did you see when you looked around?
Well, as I look around, and I can see it clearly to this day, I'm looking around. It's like I'm suspended in space, really. I don't believe I got to a spirit world. I got to a place where, where I was
Holding
suspended.
space?
Yeah, it was almost like I was hanging in space, which is a bit mad. These beings, these people, these spirits, whatever we want to call them, were there. And it was just a whole lot of beautiful, beautiful love. So as I look around, I can see a dark sky, I can see stars, I don't see any moon, I don't see any planets. I just see and experience these people around me. And of course, this lady who was sort of offside to me, and she drew my attention. As I say, she stood in front of what appeared to be some sort of a hedge. It was, I believe, a barrier. I knew there were people beyond that barrier. But this interaction I had with her was what I kept my focus on. And at the point, as I say, when I realized that I understood that I couldn't stay, there was no rushing back, there was no withdrawing. It was just like click, and I was back in the pavement.
Right. So this barrier or hedge that you saw, maybe because I've heard of this similar things in other NDE accounts. Like, for example, had you crossed a certain point, you may not have been able to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that since because, as I say, at 11 years old, I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to work out really what had happened to me, and for a long, long time, I didn't realize that it was a near-death experience at all. It was just something that had happened to me that was very profound. Um, I think I told one person afterwards, because I was in hospital for a few days, obviously. Um, and then when I went back to school, I had a lovely English teacher, Mrs. Clark, and she asked me if I was okay, and I told her what had happened, and she seemed really interested, and she asked me to write it down, so I did. And she was really the only person that I ever really talked about it with until I read Raymond Moody's book, and I must have been 20 when I read that. And then I realized, wow, that's what happened to me.
That's what I was
So,
going to ask you, like how you discovered it, and because obviously back then there was no YouTube or easy
no,
accessible, computers to Google and this kind of thing. You'd have to go to a library, and then only if there's anything published like Life After Life would you even know.
what actually happened was I was on my way to London by a train, and it was at that particular point, I think it was probably maybe about an hour and a half journey from where I lived. So I was going into King's Cross in London, and I'd stopped as I went into the station to pick up a magazine, and these were the bad old days when you could smoke on trains, and and it was they would sell cigarettes. There was no takeaway food, maybe a candy bar or something like that, but there was mainly magazines and the odd paperback. And I stopped there, and I saw this book, Life After Life, and I just reached out and I picked it up. It didn't cost me a lot of money. And I sat on the train and started to read it. And within maybe a couple of pages, it was just like, whoa, this. It's not exactly the same, but this is what happened to me. And of course, I can't even remember now why I was going to London. I think it was to some concert or something. And I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay on the train and read it because it was such a riveting book. And I remember when I came home, going straight to my bedroom and just completely devouring this book, because here was somebody saying to me, what happened to you was real. Up until then, I'd always thought it was perhaps something I'd imagined. I also thought that it was something I dreamt because I'd been knocked out. All of these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't want to hear about it. I didn't feel comfortable telling anybody because I did question what it was. It was only Raymond Moody's book that made me look at it again and realize, you know what, I've had a really profound experience here. And it was that really that, as I say, made me realize that something extraordinary had happened to me. And I was very lucky to pick the book up that day.
So there was at one point a light went on in your head and said, oh my God, like you said, that's what happened to me, right? So did you really have like full on 100% realization that death, that's what happened to me? I must have died that day?
I think I had that realization even as I was having the experience, because the one thing I do remember thinking is, my body's there and I'm here and I'm alive. What is that? But it wasn't in the way that I can examine it now as an adult. So I think I did know, but when I read the Raymond Moody book, certainly it was, God, we can't die. We cannot die, because I know that I was out of my body, completely out of my body. And if I can be out of my body and completely aware of everything, there can be no death. Exactly. So yeah, the book came, the whole thing's been a journey. So yeah, the book helped me realize.
Yeah, there was Raymond Moody's book. There wasn't really a lot, as far as I know anyways, there wasn't a lot of other literature written at the time. So not a lot to go on, you know?
There really wasn't. And if it hadn't have been for that book, I would have probably taken that experience. And obviously now we live in a technological dream world, you know, where we can access all these wonderful experiences. And I think that is very, very beautiful, that I am not alone. There are so many of us. And this is what the whole thing has taken me on a journey throughout my life of exploration. If it happened to me, it's happened to other people. And I think we are so blessed with being able to discuss this, because, like myself, if I hadn't picked that book up, I would never have known about it. So the more we talk about this, the more it comes into mainstream. It's not abnormal. You know, there are so many of us experiencing or have experienced these things. And we have to say, you know, hold on a minute. This is not, as I've been told, imagination, hallucination, all of these, they don't touch what a near-death experience is. It's so, so real and so profoundly impacted. Hallucinations are not like that. No. Sorry, I've just got a little rant there.
No, please. I mean, anytime. I find it extraordinary and so interesting, to say the least. You know, these experiences, every single one of them, everyone that I talk to, they all hit me, you know, very personally. And yeah, now if you want to go on a tangent, by all means, that's what this platform is all about. Everybody that watches these videos are very interested in every detail that you can provide. So, by all means. So I mean, I find this really interesting, especially because of the fact, you know, as I mentioned earlier, that this is 1967. You know, pretty much everybody had maybe one TV if they were lucky in their house, black and white TV with one or
Yeah.
two channels that may have come in, you know, once in a while and on a decent frequency. And like I mentioned, like just to set up the you know, for younger people watching, it's pretty crazy. Like you really had nothing at your disposal
No.
to work around such an event. And again, as you already mentioned, it's not this typical subject matter that you can just speak to anybody about as well,
No.
right? So you're sort of like in a tough spot, you know, if and I guess a perplexing spot too, you know, because like what did I experience, you know?
There was one girl that I went to school with, and I remember telling her about it, and she looked at me and she went, "Do you know, my sister had that happen to her. She'd apparently fallen into a river or something, and she didn't die, but she'd had this out of body. She'd come out of her body, and she spoke about the love and the calm. And I do remember that. But you're quite right. There wasn't anything to bounce ourselves off of, and I think maybe maybe that was okay because I put it in a place where it was special and I kind of hugged it. It was my huggy place. And, I mean, like most kids going through growing up, there was some tough times, sometimes I was sad, a lot of times I was sad. But when I was sad, I would draw on it and know that I'd been to a special place that perhaps not everybody has been to. And there was somebody there that totally and utterly loved me, just completely and utterly accepted and welcomed me and loved me. I didn't understand who that person was. I'm 65 and I still don't know who that person was, but I can still remember the feeling of pure love. And so it was kind of like a nest. It was my little place. I thought about this. I mean, I was 11. I was not religious. I wasn't brought up in any religious way, apart from to say that I was a Catholic. But we didn't strictly go to mass every Sunday or confession or anything. So I didn't have that background of a lot of religion. Yes, I believed absolutely there was a guy called Jesus. Still do believe, but I wasn't in a place where I had, a huge religious background. School then, we did have assemblies and it was Christian based. Um, but again, it didn't feature massively in my life. If I suppose if I could describe her, I would describe her as being the most benevolent grandmother with a 35-year-old face. She was young.
Yeah.
And kind. The kindness. Maybe a spirit guide. Yeah.
So you
But
did see her face then? It
oh
wasn't.
yeah. Oh yeah, because she smiled straight into my face. And I remember thinking that her beauty came from within her. As I say, she was made of it. It's almost like she was made of light.
Right.
So she was shimmery and there was nothing, please don't think there was anything wispy about her. She was very, very much there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And it was like the most benevolent grandmother. There was a softness, there was a kindness, an understanding. But as I say, we rate beauty in various ways, don't we?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't that kind of beauty at all. It was from in here.
Yeah. After you had read the Raymond Moody book, the Life After Life, I believe it's called. Did you at that point engage in any more conversations about your experience with anyone?
Yes,
Friends?
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because in a way, what Raymond Moody did was allowed me to talk about it without feeling like an idiot. Um, and I think that was probably where my whole life started on its spiritual journey, if that's the way to put it. Yeah, it was almost like he gave me the key to accept that something had happened to me. And I did for a long time think, well, why me? Why did that happen to me? And I guess the answer always come back, why not? I wasn't special. I was just an ordinary girl from a place in England, Northamptonshire. But it did profoundly impact my life and has continued to do so. And increasingly continues to do so.
Right.
So yes, it never has stopped since, and I am so blessed to have
Yeah.
had it.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I wish I could give everybody one moment of what I experienced. I'm getting quite emotional here. I can feel myself go, because it's so beautiful. It really is.
Yeah. You know, you don't actually need to, not to take away from your amazing, profound experience, but you actually don't technically need a near-death experience to experience what you experienced. That's a lot of the use of the word experience. But you know what I mean? So like in meditation, various forms of meditation, you can, you know, tap into those frequencies and as you're probably already aware, you know, come into contact with other spiritual beings. I mean, all these things, the feeling of unconditional love that you experienced, these are at everyone's fingertips. If you really wanted to, if you're really committed and wanted to get into that kind of thing, you can experience this thing through meditation. You know, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. You have to commit to it, so to speak. I don't like to use that word because that makes it a thing, and meditation shouldn't be a thing. It should be a no thing. But at the end of the day, you know, you need to do it more than once. You need to practice it for a while. Some people can get lucky and even have these type of experiences, breakthroughs on the first shot. It's not impossible.
I would absolutely agree with you. It's it's meditation is wonderful, and there is so much out there that we can achieve. You know, that lovely place, and I'm 100%, and I'm smiling here because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I meditate, I sit with a group. I'm very fortunate, and again, this has come on the back of the near-death experience. I now sit with a spiritual circle of very dear friends. We've sat together for 13 years, pardon me.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
and it started purely by accident. We now meditate together. We have a spiritual circle, and it's there for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yes. I mean, at first we didn't meditate properly, but we've learned to. And
Yeah.
like you quite rightly say, you keep going at it, but the rewards are wonderful. And one thing doing all of that has done is made me very much has made us all aware of our place and how we impact on other people. And I think you come out of it being kinder to yourself, but kinder to each other. I think the whole thing, we've got it very wrong. And I think that came from, again, this understanding that, you know, life doesn't have to be life. We're here to learn, and life will kick stuff at you, but there will come a point where you, and I think this has come directly from the near death experience for me, is that you start to see, rather than it just happening to you and somebody's, you know, terrible thing, you start to see the lessons. How do you deal with that? How do you know? You change your perspective, sitting in the quiet, meditating, just letting that go.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a place of calm. And what life kicks at you then isn't, we can see, when we see it as a lesson, we can approach it and work with it.
Mm-hmm.
rather than sitting there and going, I'm the victim and this has happened to me. No, okay, this has happened. How am I going to deal with this? Knowing that I'm learning from this. So yeah, I think we have got a lot of things really wrong.
Well, as you're saying, it's like we can look at it as our experience. So that gives us the advantage of when you have that awareness, that gives us the advantage of, okay, well, I'm here. Now I could take a slightly different standpoint and just be the observer of what's happening at this moment.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you're able to soak in a lot more,
yeah.
and you're also able to observe it from a different perspective that is not directly, even though deep within you feel even more closely connected, you've actually separated yourself, right?
Mhm.
Or your ego is no longer observing, it's in the situation, and yourself, your higher self, or maybe both, is observing the situation. Like, to give you an example, I know you understand this, but to give whoever's watching an examples, I remember when I guess, I don't know, a few months after I started meditating quite heavily, I was in traffic here in Montreal. There's a certain area of unpredictable traffic that I'm sure any big city has, that doesn't matter what time of day it is or what day it is, it's just unpredictable and bloody annoying, right? So and you get all kinds of characters. So one day I'm in traffic, and sure enough, somebody cuts me off in a very rude, I mean, is there any other way, manner? And instead of reacting, I just kind of smirked, and I kind of like put myself in an observer seat, just kind of just observed it. And after, I mean, this all took place in less than 30 seconds, but the feeling that was attached to that lasted for the rest of the day, because I was like, wow, I would have reacted in a very different way
Right.
before, you know?
Mm.
And I felt at that moment like I'd been given a gift, like, oh,
Yes.
cool, wow. I just like, I just had an amazing experience, and I can do this over and over again for free.
That's right. A similar thing happened to me. Traffic, some irate guy. It's giving it all back, and it's just like, now I'm not perfect just because I had a near-death experience. I was like, rah, 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 rah. I just stopped or pulled back, and I thought, oh my God, you must be having a really bad day today. And I could see his wife in the car, and she didn't look happy. And instead of responding, I just let it go. And you know, I felt so much better for doing that. And
Yeah.
it was like, I wasn't stressed. I thought, on you go. He cut me up as well, and he was giving it all, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, and isn't it empowering as
Yeah.
well? Because you haven't fallen victim to your, you know, passions and emotions. And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the whole empowering thing, because you do feel somewhat empowered, and I don't want to sound like that's like a power trip empowerment. It's a much more of a okay, I'm really in control of the situation, and I'm not even technically in this situation, I'm just
Right.
observing it, you
Yeah,
know?
you're observing.
And then so you come off of that having A, learned something, B, affected other lives at that moment that
Mhm.
would have been, been a different scenario had the reaction occurred, right? So now that person might be having a better day from your
Right, right.
non-reaction. Ripple effect, right?
We call it road rage here,
Mm-hmm,
you know, and we have
yeah.
had deaths over here where somebody's got out of the car and they've hit somebody and they're dead, you know, and terrible. You So I think if you can get to that place of stepping back, okay, meditation is massively important. I never really realized just how important it was until I started to do it. I feel
Dude,
that I have been blessed by the experience that I
and it's
had.
such a young age, right? So you got your whole life to be, affected by that.
I do believe that if I hadn't had it, my obviously I can't tell because I've only had the one life as far as I'm aware at the moment. Um, but it's been a wonderful learning, and it came from that point. It took me on a journey of study. I turned to religion because I thought this has to be. After I read Raymond Moody, I thought, wow, where does Jesus feature in all of this? So I went off and did a bit of a comparative study of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, because I thought obviously God's got to be in there somewhere, but it didn't do it for me. But what it did was took me on lots of different places. It's taken me to India several times. I love India, and I love Indian food. To find, I suppose, what I was looking for, or what I'd experienced, because it was so profound. And I'm happy to admit that there was a period in there where I took psychedelic drugs because I wanted to get to that. None of which worked, I have to say. The religion didn't work, and certainly the psychedelic drugs didn't work. There was a lot of parties, but I was very young, and we all make mistakes, and I had some fun in there, but I never achieved it again, and I gave up trying to even achieve it, because I realized it's a totally unique thing that happened. It wasn't anything that I could have controlled. Why it happened to me, I have no clue, but it has led to a place where, as I said, I've reached this age and I am absolutely 100%, I know that we cannot die. We don't die. Our consciousness cannot be killed.
You ended up in hospital after the actual event happened.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, like, did you come back with any sort of, like, did they say you had a concussion, or did you have...
Yeah, massive concussion. I couldn't open my eyes for I think it was 2 or 3 days. I always thought that I thought I'd smashed my head here. In actual fact, there is a scar on one side where I'd hit it. And what it had done was closed my eyes completely. I mean, they took photographs of it. I just couldn't open my eyes for 3 days. I had concussion. So they kept me in observation. And eventually, I mean, this was just totally black and bruised. It all went down here as well.
Wow.
But bizarrely, there was no brain damage. I didn't break my skull, which surprises me. No, I came home with 2 wonderful black eyes, which my friends were very impressed with, I have to say.
I bet. After that happened, because you just mentioned your friends and stuff.
Yeah.
You never talked about it with them.
I think...
What are you going to talk about? You don't really understand what happened at
Well,
that
yeah, it's really difficult. Kids, and I was a kid, so I know, we're running around, we're interested in something for 5 minutes. You're not in a position to have those deep kind of conversations. As I say, I did mention it at school quite because the teacher asked me if that was okay, and I told her about it, and she didn't sort of say oh. So with other kids, I did mention that I'd had this, that I was floating, that I was out of my body, and I don't remember it ever being something we sat around and discussed. It probably yeah, really, okay, let's go on and ride our bikes or our skates or climb a tree or something. It was later on, as I say, there was this one girl that I knew, and we were discussing something, and I'd said this had happened to me years before, and by this time I must have been a teenager, I suppose. And it was her. She turned and said, that her sister had a similar thing, as I say, when she fallen in the river. So no, it was never really sort of discussed because there was nobody to discuss it with. My parents would not have been open to that kind of thing. I can't remember sitting down and saying, hey, Mom, when I got run over that time, I was actually up there. No. Because it wasn't a thing that we talked about, It's really hard, isn't it? How can you talk about something that's unexplainable? It's when you get later on and you find people like yourselves or people that share your beliefs that you can sit down and comfortably say and not think that you sound like a complete nutcase.
Now you have the advantage of having Facebook, these wonderful where we met on these
Yeah, yeah.
amazing near-death experience pages. And shout out to the group admins of those pages, because it's quite amazing. I mean, imagine having had that back in 1967.
I read, of course, much later, the Ebden Alexander experience. Yeah. Now, it was kind of, I mean, that was very recently, but the joy of reading that, it's like, at last, we've got a man of science here that underwent this. You know, I mean, he knew what was happening to his brain. He can explain it. And I think, and this is just a theory that I have, that he underwent that because he is so credible. You know,
Most
I'm
definitely.
a lady from the UK, but here is a man that has a scientific background. He knows, and he said this, this shouldn't be able to happen. When the brain dies, the brain dies, you know.
Yeah.
And to read that, I mean, it was like, yes. And I passed this book around to all my friends. Go, there you go, there you go. That's it. This is it. And it's great that we have people like him. And sadly, too many people go, no, it couldn't have happened. Didn't happen. It's hallucination. If it's happened to you, you will not say that.
No,
You
most
will not say
definitely.
that.
That's very well said, actually. If it's happened to you, you would not say that, you know,
Yeah.
because first of all, if you believe something, then and you believed it happened, then it happened, right?
So the thing I think is people will say, you know, and this is what I've picked up, or certainly on the groups online, is they expect people that have had them to come back full of this profound knowledge, all wisdom and all the rest of it. But that is a little bit silly, if I may say so. Now, here's the thing. I was going to Mexico one time, and we had to stop off in America to refuel or something. And of course, because we weren't entering America, we weren't allowed to leave this particular area of the airport. Now, I can quite rightly say I've been to America, but I don't know America. And I sometimes think, I have a cat coming up now. I sometimes think that we people that have a near-death experience, we're given a tiny little snapshot of that place. I might have one experience, you might have another experience. Some of us might receive some knowledge, some profound wisdom, but I think it's all of them together that's important, not one or not, you know, two or three. And together they start to build up a picture of what it might be like, of what we've experienced. But no one person can experience that, can they? In the same way, I couldn't experience America by getting off the plane and, you know, while it was being refueled and being put in a room. Am I making sense with that?
You know, once somebody had mentioned something similar to what you were saying in one of the group pages, and I chimed in saying, well, look, you know, take 3 random people that have all been to Disneyland, a place everyone even knows already, okay?
Yeah.
At least here in America. And ask them what their experience was like. You think they're going to be the same? Of course not. They're going to be similar, you know?
It's going to be
I heard
aspects.
these crazy sounds. There was a lot of people. It was a happy vibe. Similar, right? But very different. Everybody has a different experience. You can't expect yours to be the one and only full telling experience. It just doesn't work like that. Heaven's a big place. It's got to be a lot bigger than here.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. But collectively, they start to build up a body of evidence. You know, there are similarities. I mean, the love, the overwhelming love that so many people talk about, and I certainly felt. But it's always going to be an individual thing. But that doesn't mean that they're not real because they don't fit somebody's, you know, what they should be. Accept them for what they are and rejoice in them that they are happening to people.
That's right.
Because it brings so much hope.
I realize that this experience obviously had a huge impact on your life. Is there anything from it that you can say is attributed to this experience in terms of like any personal enhancements? Or, you know, some people report suddenly becoming clairvoyant, or having.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All day long. All day long. Yeah. I didn't notice it at the time. Of course, I didn't. As I say, I lived my childhood with this profound experience. Um, but as I got older, I became attracted to the spiritualist movement. And I became attracted to that because I started to experience things myself. And over the years, and looking back, I realized that I would occasionally know stuff. I would, yeah. And that, at first, I just thought I would be imagining it. And I was, one day, much, much later, I had my first, what I call, psychic experience. And if I may tell you very quickly,
Please, take your time.
a friend of mine had died previously, 8 weeks before. He'd been killed on his motorbike. A car had hit him. He had a girl on the back. Both of them died immediately. He had his friend, his partner, my friend, was at home. She was pregnant. She was about to give birth to her baby, and he died. Anyway, it was about 8 weeks after his death. I'd woken up in the morning. It was about 5:30. Uh, and I had to go to the bathroom. And I lived in an old Victorian house.
Mm-hmm.
And old Victorian houses in England tend to have their toilet downstairs. So I had to get up, out my cozy bed, and I'm going down and go to the bathroom. I come back up, sit on the side of the bed, swing my legs around, and there's my friend in front of me. And it was like, now I never thought that this was weird. Now this is crazy. And it was like, and I said to him, what did you think when you realized you were dead? Now this is really stupid. And he went, I'm bloody annoyed. And he was there in front of me. And he said, but it's her that I'm worried about. And I saw in my head his partner who'd had this baby. Now, I got back into bed and I was, okay, did go back to sleep, but it was a Friday. It was so clear. Again, it's one of those things. It was so clear. It was Friday and I was still quite young, and we used to go out on the night time, doing what young people do, having a drink, spending the entire weekend getting over it, the kind of things that youngsters do. And I'd gone to work that day and I told somebody about it. They said, don't tell her. Please don't tell her. I said, well, he was in my bedroom. And they said, well, goodness sake, don't tell her. It'll send her over the edge. Well, this feeling kept growing and growing all day long. That particular night, we went out for a drink, but there was only two of us. There used to be a whole group of us, but that particular night, it was boring. It was awful. I kept looking at my watch, and this desire to need to go on and tell her kept growing. So it's about 10 o'clock. And again, it's before we have mobile phones or anything. So I thought, and I said to my friend, I said, you know what, I'm going home. This night is a complete disaster. I've got a phone for my friend. Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Anyway, I made my way home, already deciding the only phones available were landlines. And it would be about 10 o'clock at night by now. And I thought, if she doesn't pick up on the fifth ring, that's it. I'm not supposed to do this. And I rang her. She picked up on the second ring. And I told her what had happened. She said, I need to come and see you. And she came and see me the next day. I talked about it. I had to go over it several times because she was grasping. She wanted something. She so wanted something. And I said, look, the local spiritualist church, it's Saturday now, of course. I said, they do an evening of clairvoyance. Perhaps we should go there. And I said, but you can't expect to get a message. Don't expect to get a message, but we'll see. Off we went. And we sat there. I don't think I've ever wished for anything so much. I was staring at the medium. She must have felt like my eyes were burning into her skull. And I'm thinking, please get a message, get a message, get a message. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Anyway, the meeting ended, and as normal over here, cup of tea, because that's what we do, because we're Brits. And standing having this cup of tea and a nice biscuit, and out of the crowd came a lady called Barbara, who was an elder of the church. And she tapped me on the church because she'd seen me around some point and said, that young lady needs a reading. Bring her in the back room and I'll do it now. And I said to my friend, I said, she wants to give you a reading. I said, I'll go outside and have a cigarette. She was in there an hour and she came out and her eyes were shining and she said to me, he lives. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. And that was the first time that I ever saw spirit. And I still never thought that I had any ability. I just thought it was something weird that had happened to me. But over the years, I've met people, beautiful souls that have also had similar experiences. And now I sit with them, and I've been developing mediumship for myself and with my friends for the last 13 years. And I've worked and been tutored by Gordon Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's real. We cannot die.
Yeah.
And this is a direct result, I feel sure, of the near-death experience. If I hadn't have had that at 11 years old, I would have probably ignored all of those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just thought that they were strange. Yeah. But yeah, my friend, and if I just want to conclude, after she'd come out of that, it was maybe only, she's now a woman of 50. Mm-hmm. And it was probably 10 years ago. We were talking and she said, I need to tell you something, Chris. She said, remember that night you called me and told me you'd seen Pat? I said, yeah. She says, I was going to kill myself that night. I couldn't live without him. I hadn't felt him. And she said, when you rang me up, she said, it didn't take the pain. It didn't make me, any of that stop. What she said was it gave me a little bit so that I could go to the next bit. And I never knew that she had already apparently written a letter to people, and she was going to take her baby, who was really only 6 weeks. Well, no, he was 7 weeks old because he was born within days of the passing of his father. So he was only about 7.5 weeks old. She was going to take him to her mother's, and she was going to go out and kill herself. So I think spirit had to step in at that point. And I think they came through me because I didn't question it. And I know Pat didn't believe in it, but he obviously does now. So yeah, sorry, I got a bit distracted with that. It
was a lovely story, and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
It's very lovely, in fact.
So yes, I do think you come back from there with, even if you don't come back with being psychic, which I do believe we are all psychic. I think we come back with greater understanding and perhaps just an open mind that accepts that, this is not everything. There are other things at work, beautiful things that some of us can tap into. Yeah.
The spirit apparition that you witnessed was did it appear in sort of an outline of light, or is it sort of like a translucent physical body? What did you see?
The best way to describe it is like looking at somebody through a window. Okay. That is the best way I can explain it. It's almost like they're stood behind the window and perhaps the glass is a little bit, maybe shimmery.
Right.
That's the best way to do it. But clear, absolutely clear, but so yeah, shimmery.
Do you think that was the veil? Maybe you saw a physicality of the veil that we all refer to?
I guess. I mean, I really can't answer that, but yeah, I've had that happen to me once since, and that was it wasn't as so interactive. But my best friend died 5 years ago, and
I'm
within
sorry.
4 hours of her dying, she was stood over there actually, and all I got was her going like that. That was our sign. And it was like, and I punched the air. I went, yo, because we were both the same age, and we knew that one of us, I mean, we'd grown up together, and we knew at one point one of us wasn't going to be around. And she actually died really suddenly without warning. She just went to bed and died. And she was 60 years old. And I got the message in the morning at 6 o'clock. And wow, and about 3 hours later,
Popped by to say hello before she took off somewhere else.
and that's how I feel it was really, because we'd always have this thing, because by now, obviously, I believed in all of this completely by now, because all that's happened in my life. And she was always a little bit skeptical, she was all like, I don't know. I said, look, there's going to come a day, when you're going to believe it. And we had this thing that if one of us died, we would absolutely come back and prove it. And as long as we didn't stand at the bottom of the bed, rattling the chains and all of that kind of stuff. And this, I wasn't looking for it. I'd had the news, obviously, I was upset. I'd smoked about 10 cigarettes. And it was just like, what's happening? I was talking to you yesterday, you're not here. So there was that, and people would say, oh, well, you were in... And that annoyed me, because when I told somebody about it, she went, oh, well, you were grieving. And it's like, how dare you take away from that beautiful experience, that I've just had.
Yeah.
Anyway, I come out of the kitchen, and as I came out, she was just stood right there. And all that happened was she gave me the thumbs up. I punched the air and went, yes, I saw you. But the one thing I noticed was she had white hair. She did. When I knew her as a young girl, she had totally black hair. She already had black hair by now. She already looked about 20 years younger. Everything that had ailed her had gone. She was a young her, and I know I saw it. Yeah,
that's amazing.
So, and she again had this kind of film almost in front of her. Yeah,
that's very fortunate.
Very blessed.
Very, very blessed.
For the following 6 months, I got messages, I got signs, I got phones ringing. I remember
from her. They were
yeah. I mean, it was madness. She certainly proved. One day I was sitting here with a friend, and my phone went. Of course, it's a mobile phone, and I went, "That is a strange number." It was like 800. 800 000. It was just a crazy number that doesn't exist. So I picked it up. My other friend was here, and it was like white noise. And all I heard was goodbye. And so I said to my friend, look, so she says, dial it back, Chris. But so straight away we got on the computer, we got on, nothing, doesn't exist. But I said, there it is on my phone. She says, I can see it, Chris. She says, I know it happened because I've just seen it happen. And she was able to send me that. And I do believe when we first pass over, that we can somehow connect to our friends.
I think so. I think so at first, for those that kind of not linger, but stick around a little bit.
Yeah,
because I think once at some point, I don't know. I feel like at some point there's kind of no looking back unless they need to, because you're off and on to a new dimension, a new experience. And
I'm so happy you've just said that, because after about 6 months, all of those signs seemed to stop. And I thought, okay, so they've stopped. She's settled now. Yeah. I think she was hanging around. There was a new baby being born and stuff like that in the family. And she's hung around. She knows I'm okay. She knows her family's okay. So she's gone on, and you saying that's exactly how I sort of kind of thought. Yeah, she's gone on now to live her life.
Yeah, not to say that there's no more connecting and that connecting with her is not possible. I don't think that at all. The contrary, actually. But
yeah.
But I think it's more on a needs basis. Like if you really need to contact her, the chances are you will,
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been such a delight to speak with you, Christine, and I'm so happy that you agreed to come on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, it's been lovely. Do you know, this is the first time I've actually publicly spoke about it.
Oh,
Apart,
really? Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel
Apart
honored.
from
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
No, no, you. It's really, and again, you see, I start to put all these things together because I've been on this near-death experience group on Facebook, and some of them I've read, and I thought, well, perhaps I should share mine. You know, perhaps it's got some merit.
Mhm.
Um, and then you contacted me, and I didn't hesitate because I thought, maybe people would like to hear about this because the one thing I came away from is from that whole experience was there is something so much more. Have hope. You know, the world isn't always kind to us. And we're in Europe and we have, as you probably know, we have war here in Europe now.
Yeah.
And I think the world needs hope. There is good in this world and we need to find it. And if this little thing can give to somebody a little bit of hope, and that's what it's all about. So yeah, I've only ever spoke about it to friends, so this is the first time, and it
Mm.
was really nice that it was with you.
I appreciate that, and I'm so happy that you finally did speak about it because I'm quite sure that it's going to have an effect on
I hope it
more
does.
than one, and a good effect. So, thank you
Yeah,
so much for being a part of this journey and for
very
sharing your story
welcome.
with me.
You're very welcome.
Wonderful.